building a better Bay Area, moving forward, finding solutions. This is ABC7 News.
Hi there, I'm Kristen Z. You're watching Getting Answers live on ABC7, Hulu Live, and wherever you stream. We ask experts your questions every day at 3 to get answers for you in real time. Today, we'll dive into something fun as we look ahead to Thanksgiving. The CEO of Gadot, a Bay Area company, will be joining us to discuss an adult mac and cheese, one that Wonder Woman herself enjoys. But before that, we'll chat with a UC Berkeley energy professor about President Biden's plan for the country's petroleum reserve and gas prices. And of course, we want to discuss the latest COVID-19 news. Former Cal star and NFL quarterback of the Green Bay Packers, Rodgers, is making headlines once again as we're learning he's suffering a toe injury that at one point he referred to as a COVID injury, but now insists it was not. Now, because he is Rodgers, people are paying close attention and wondering what is going on. Is it COVID toe? What is that? And whatever you call it, what are the injuries and illnesses related to COVID? Joining us to talk about all that, today's COVID headlines and safe holiday celebrations, UCSF infectious disease specialist, Dr. Peter Chin Hong. Dr. Chin Hong, thanks for your time today, right before Thanksgiving.
Always a pleasure, Kristen. Thank you. All
right, so a lot to get into. We'll start with, what is COVID toe? Is it a real thing?
Yeah, COVID toe is definitely a real thing. It's basically a purple patch that develops in your toes. It can develop in your fingers, your elbow. It happens 1 to 4 weeks after COVID, particularly if you've had mild symptoms like Rodgers. So he's kind of following textbook. And it kind of illustrates that the immune system is kind of gone awry and is kind of like making these lesions on your skin after the fact.
So what you're looking at there, the video, is of a Bay Area woman from San Francisco who had, COVID fingers, I guess, discoloration. She had to get a few fingers amputated. Explain how a respiratory tract infection can lead to ailments involving the skin, toes, or fingers.
Yeah, so basically there are two phases in the disease we know as COVID. There's a viral phase when you get exposed to the virus makes more of itself. And there's the inflammatory phase when your body gets angry because it sees the virus. So that inflammation is bad inflammation. It can kill you, like in the lungs. But even if it doesn't kill you, it can kind of linger on for a few more weeks, cause things like long COVID, COVID toes, because it kind of attacks other parts of your body, including your skin. And that's what COVID toes, COVID fingers are.
Got it. All right. Now, Rodgers himself has referred to it as COVID toe before switching to calling it a toe fracture, and is today actually demanding an apology from the Wall Street Journal for publishing that he had COVID toe. You have not treated Rodgers, of course, but from what you've seen and heard, does his condition align with COVID toe?
Totally. It aligns with the fact of the time course, 1 to 4 weeks. It aligns with the fact that most people with COVID toes didn't have bad COVID to begin with, so that's consistent. And number 3, it's usually mild, even though the case you showed looks severe. Most people with COVID toes, nothing happens.
I mean, he says it's painful. It can be painful, right?
It can be painful, it can be itchy, but it can also be mild.
Okay. We know Rodgers had COVID. We know he was vague initially about his vaccination status until he caught it, and then it came out that he was unvaccinated. Rodgers explained he couldn't get the Pfizer or Moderna vaccines because he's allergic to an ingredient in them. So what ingredient is in those vaccines that could, perhaps even in the smallest of populations, very unlikely, but possible at all, cause such an allergic reaction that he feared?
So that ingredient that people worry about is very, very rare. It's only in the mRNA vaccines, and it's called PEG. It's a component of some IVs. So sometimes people go to the hospital, they got an IV, and then they had an anaphylactic reaction to it. They can't breathe, etc. That's what people are talking about. And that's the reason why everyone gets observed for 15 minutes at least. If you have a history, you get observed for 30 minutes. It's not really an absolute contraindication, but something that people pay attention to when you get the shot.
I mean, roughly 1 in how many people is the estimate?
1 in a million, 1 to 12 per million. Very, very rare.
Okay. Now, Rodgers also said the Johnson & Johnson shot was, quote, not even an option for him because of blood clotting concerns. Do those concerns still exist in the scientific community? I mean, it was talked about earlier.
There's still some acknowledgement that there is clots associated with J&J, but again, very, very rare, mainly in middle-aged women, and still it's a rare situation. I think the big issue to know for the population with clots and J&J is that we've come a long way since the early days, and we know how to treat it now. So if you recognize, you treat it, people can do quite well. And I personally have only seen one person with it at the hospital. It was a sort of like a younger man, and he did very, very well with it.
Okay. Rodgers said that he was told by a Maine NFL doctor that it's impossible for a vaccinated person to get COVID or spread COVID. Rodgers cited that in defense of his choice not to vaccinate. What do you want people to know about the possibility of transmission by a vaccinated person?
So we do know from studies from the beginning and the Delta and Provincetown that people who get breakthrough who are vaccinated have initially the same amount of virus in their noses than somebody who's unvaccinated. What we've learned subsequently is that slope goes down very, very quickly in somebody who's vaccinated and stays very high in somebody who's unvaccinated. What we take that to mean is that people who are unvaccinated can spread COVID a lot more than people who are vaccinated, but people who are vaccinated can definitely pass to others, even though they would probably not get very, very sick themselves.
Got it. Okay. Tiffany has a question for you here. She says, my husband has this issue. I think she's referring to the allergy. He's not allowed to get the vaccine. His shock happened 24 hours after the flu shot. If that really is the case with her husband, how best to protect himself? And also, is there a vaccination on the horizon, too, that will be administered differently?
Yeah, so there are lots of vaccines on the horizon. I mean, different kinds. For example, Novavax, which is made in Maryland, has the people around the world have been using or beginning to use that vaccine now. It's a very different vaccine. It's almost like the human papillomavirus vaccine. Mm-hmm. So people with severe allergies could wait for one of those. But if you have a severe allergy to PEG, the J&J vaccine should be very safe.
All right. Before we get on to Thanksgiving stuff, I want to ask you, what are some of the other conditions that could be brought on by COVID, either short-term or long-term, that people should be aware of?
So I think the most important ones for post-COVID situation is long COVID. It affects up to 30% of people. I think many people in the population know that already or know somebody who might have it. We think that it's much more common to get long COVID after unvaccinated. If you're unvaccinated, you get COVID by more than 2 times compared to if you're having a breakthrough infection while vaccinated. That's an important issue. Also, the symptoms that people have with breakthrough, if they do get symptoms, are very, very different. No brain fog or anything. Maybe some alterations of taste and smell might linger. So that's one thing. The second is like some of these inflammatory conditions like COVID-2s, except they could inflame other parts of your body, your heart, your lungs, etc., after the COVID has gone away. And that's called MISC in children or MISA in adults. So these are some of the post-COVID syndromes that we look out for.
All right. So Dr. Chin Hong, with that information that you presented, I think we're all hoping not to catch COVID over Thanksgiving as we travel, as we gather. So let's talk about safety and where the risks are and how to minimize them. Let's start with the travel portion. What do you think?
So I think traveling is really safe for somebody who's vaccinated, particularly if vaccinated and boosted. I think the first thing you want to do with traveling is think about where you're going. Certainly, if you're going to a destination that has a huge surge now, like Michigan or Minnesota, Vermont, New Hampshire, you'd probably want to just take it easy or be more careful and say if you're going to Florida, Hawaii, or staying in California, even though we're kind of hovering at this high level. So that's the first thing to think about. Planes, safe, wear your mask, if you want to put the ventilation on yourself. But as a vaccinated person and a boosted person, I feel kind of invincible right now, to tell you the truth, although I'm still going to be prepared.
Okay, that's good to know. How about the actual gathering part with family? What are some of the questions to consider?
So there are 3 questions to really think about. Number 1, what's the vaccination status of the people around me? I know a lot of people personally who have been kind of limiting it indoors to vaccinated only? Number two, have they been tested recently? So I know somebody, for example, who tested everybody in the driveway before they came indoors with a rapid test. Everyone felt a lot better. And then number three, do we need to do anything while you're in the room? So do you open the windows or not? And I'd say the last thing is to just probably after all that, just enjoy yourself. I think it's a very different risk situation if you're vaccinated compared to last year.
For folks who are not vaccinated, upon return, would you recommend taking a test?
Yes, I mean, even for vaccinated people, say you're going back to a household with some elderly folks or relatives, you might want to, test maybe 3 days or so, 2 or 3 days after coming back home. I think that will give you a little bit more security. More important for an unvaccinated person, just to make sure the trip went okay.
All right. Dr. Chen Hong, I mentioned your wonderful idea, I thought, of having, a family, maybe 4 people share one swab of like the Binax or the rapid test. I was met with a few ews, but everybody acknowledged that is potentially a good idea to test, family if you have 4 families gathering or something.
I think the caveat is you have to have very low suspicion that anybody has COVID, because the last thing you want to do is spread it. But I think there are many situations where everybody's vaccinated or boosted, and you're just doing that to make the host feel secure.
Right.
So I think that's the situation. If you're not sure, definitely do the one-on-one testing.
All right, Dr. Peter Chen Hong, thank you so much, and happy Thanksgiving to you and your family.
Same to you, Kristen. Happy Thanksgiving.
All right, we'll be right back after a short break with UC Energy professor Dr. Daniel Kammen to talk about gas prices. Be right back. All right, everybody. Hope you enjoyed that conversation with Dr. Chen Hong. He always has such great information and practical tips for us. Enjoy this beautiful view of San Francisco and the Bay. We'll be right back. Welcome back. We want to dig into President Biden's move to lower gas prices and help relieve the pain Americans are suffering at the pump. Yesterday, he promised to release millions of barrels of oil from our nation's strategic petroleum reserve in an attempt to do something about gas prices. How high are they? Well, take a look for yourself. The national average is $3.39 per gallon, according to AAA. The California average is even higher at $4.70. And here in the Bay Area, some drivers are paying even more. $4.79 there is the Bay Area average. So joining us now to talk about the impact of the president's move is UC Berkeley energy professor Dr. Daniel Kammen. Dr. Kammen, thanks for being with us today.
Well, thanks for having me on.
To understand the story, explain first, what is the Strategic Petroleum Reserve?
Well, something that was started during the OPEC crisis in the 70s, and it currently holds around 600 million barrels of oil. And this decision by the president is to release 50 million barrels of oil. And to put it in context, the U.S. uses about 20 million a day. So it's a significant chunk, but obviously we could burn through it very quickly.
Of course, yeah. I mean, I read that the reserve, and it sounds like it can last us, what, 1 month, power the U.S. if all other sources were cut off. I know historically we've tapped into it during emergencies, right, after Hurricane Katrina, Gulf War. Does this amount to that level of crisis, what we have right now?
Well, I would say yes, it does, because we ultimately plan to phase this out. And so this oil is going to get used up at some level because we are moving to a fossil fuel-free economy. And given the pain we're seeing at the pump right now for a variety of reasons, it makes sense to use this in the sense that we're using it now, given that we know we will not be using it later.
Okay, but how long do you think it might take before people start to notice a difference with this extra supply? It does take time, right, for the oil to be refined into gas and for that to translate. So what do you think?
Well, I don't think we'll actually see very much effect. What it's really intended to do is to keep prices from going any higher. Actually, this release of oil won't hit the market for a few weeks. And so it's really designed to be a buffer to keep the prices from skyrocketing anymore, which often does happen during the Thanksgiving and holiday season. So this is really something that will ease a crisis that we probably and hopefully won't see prices even higher than they are today.
Yeah, as you mentioned, there are normal cycles, right? Right now, there are a lot of demands on oil and gas, but shouldn't they be coming down pretty soon anyway? I mean, usually in winter, it starts to dip, right?
Well, they will dip a little bit, but remember, California has a particularly clean blend of oil, a clean refined mix, and that's only made by a couple local refineries. And that's one of the reasons why our prices are higher. The thing that I think will have a bigger effect, though, is that President Biden is not doing this alone. He's doing it in conjunction with President Xi in China, with Prime Minister Johnson in the UK. And so you're seeing a global effort to ease these prices so that we don't get the oil companies gouging us even more at this point in time when they recognize this vulnerability in supply chains.
Right. I think Japan, right, India, all part of that. So they are working in concert. But you mentioned, you know, what's going on with the oil companies. So President Biden is calling on federal regulators to investigate whether oil companies are somehow engaging in illegal practices by profitable, right, being profited through this. Is there any evidence that they've manipulated the market or done something like purposely produce less at this time to keep prices high?
Well, we do suspect that's going on, but it's quite hard to prove. And the main reason is that the number of refineries that we have is actually relatively limited. In New Orleans, in the so-called oil patch in the Gulf, and our very limited number in California. And so even things that look like fairly routine needs for service can be ways that oil companies are trying to restrict supply to get a higher price. So it's one that's proved very difficult to do anything like investigations of illegal activity, but we've seen this before. And so what President Biden has done is to really clamp down, to demonstrate that the national reserve, the Strategic Petroleum Reserve, can be used if we see prices inching up any higher. And so it's a wise move in terms of managing the market.
Okay, Dr. Kamen, I wonder if you also think this is related to Americans' demand right now for goods, right, rather than services, which is also kind of what contributed to the supply chain crisis.
Yeah, it's an interesting point. I mean, right now we've actually seen the demand for oil has ticked down a little bit, and that's both due to some less driving due to COVID, but also the shift towards electric vehicles. And so while our demand for services is up, people are buying more and more from Amazon and other providers, those companies are switching more and more to electric vehicles. And so demand is not rising, and then when you see the prices rising, that's what's triggered the federal investigators to look at this in terms of, is there illegal gouging going on?
Do you think ultimately this current crisis will trigger a quicker move towards green energy, more investment?
Well, I certainly hope it is. We've already seen record numbers. California's #1 export as of last month is now electric vehicles, which is just an amazing statement. We're seeing BMW and VW also ramping up. The third most valuable car company in the world, of course, Tesla's #1, but the third most valuable company, Revon, hasn't even sold a vehicle yet, and they're going to be only selling electric trucks. So the move is taking place. And I think the real key thing is if President Biden can get the Build Back Better bill through, then there's significant money for electric vehicle charging stations to invest in low-income minority communities. There's a way to push this even more quickly into the market to really make oil a thing of the past.
Dr. Daniel Kammen, thank you so much for your insight. Always appreciate it, and happy Thanksgiving to you.
Thanks a lot, and to you as well.
All right, we'll be right back with the CEO of Gadot to talk about a different kind of mac and cheese for adults. We'll be right back. All right, everybody, let's see what our director has for you in terms of a surprise, beautiful, gorgeous shot outside. Your getaway day, and it looks lovely there on the Bay Bridge. No issues right now. I think a lot of you have gotten away. Although I will say on I-80, you know, the Berkeley, Emeryville area, that's pretty crowded. And leading into San Francisco, I see a slowdown. So we'll give you a few of these traffic shots as we take a short break. In the spirit of Thanksgiving, we thought we'd do something food-related today, especially a food that Wonder Woman herself enjoys. A Santa Cruz food startup has secured over $6 million in funding to disrupt the dry noodles industry. Joining us now to talk all about Gadot, mac and cheese for the grown-up taste bud, is CEO Jen Zazit. Jen, how are you?
I'm great. Happy to be talking to you today.
Okay, did I say that right? Gadot, is that like good noodles? Is that what it is, how you got the name?
Yeah, we like to say noodles gooder, so we emphasize the good in Gadot.
All right, so tell us about the founding story. I understand one that involves Wonder Woman actress Gal Gadot.
Yeah, is that newsworthy? I don't know.
It is.
Well, so yes, so Gal is a partner of mine. This has been a long-standing vision of ours. Like, who doesn't love noodles? Who doesn't love mac and cheese? Everybody does. But usually when you're eating it, you feel pretty awful because it's kind of devoid of nutrition. And there's all these healthy options out there, but they usually don't taste very good, or they're green, or they're brown, or they're mushy, or whatever it is. And we were just like, why do we have to choose? Why do we have to choose? So myself, all of my amazing founders, Gal is one of them. Yes, she is amazing. She and I met about 3 years ago, and I knew what a foodie she was and how much she loves mac and cheese. So I reached out to her. I'm like, I think we're going to do this. But also Deb Luster, who is the original president and one of the original founding teams of Annie's, is part of our founding team, as well as Paul Earle, who is a branding professor. because as you can see on the screen, the brand is really important to us. And then of course, our amazing head of R&D who found a way to make this work, basically get all of this dense nutrition into a noodle that tastes exactly like a delicious, incredible noodle and the mac and cheese that we all love.
Okay, so I get that you were like, hey, mac and cheese shouldn't be just for kids, right? But how do you cater to the adult taste bud? Like, what kind of flavors do you offer that you think, you know, is a little more grown up, a little more sophisticated?
I'm glad you asked. Yeah, so we have a couple flavors that are the ones that you would know and expect. But then we kind of went a little bit crazy. There's one of our flavors, which is called our Mover and Shaker. It is a cacio e pepe inspired SKU. So if any of you know that kind of classic Roman dish, it's made with a lot of Romano and cracked pepper, and you actually make it by not with milk. You scoop off the starchy pasta water right before you strain and use that to thicken it up. So it's really bold flavors. And we made it for the adult palate, but we have lots of little kid foodies who are like, that was my favorite. So that's awesome.
I wonder, how did you do the taste test, right, as you were launching this product? Because during the pandemic, you couldn't really do it the typical way.
No, I know. Like, we have this incredible, our headquarters is in Santa Cruz, California, and this incredible headquarters office where we've got windows that can just roll up, and we could do sampling out the front door, but everything was shut down. We couldn't do all of the normal things. So we formed our community, which are called our do-gooders. So there's more than 1,000 do-gooders all across the country. And we started shipping little tiny baggies to every single state around the country. They all have their little do-gooder pins because they really helped to co-create this product with us. And it wasn't until they said, perfect score, and they couldn't taste anything nutritious or anything, they didn't sense any healthiness, and we knew we were done. So you're gonna have to try. You're gonna have to see what you think.
Yeah, I know people who say, if it tastes too healthy, nah, I'm not interested. So it's funny that you said that. Okay, so you mentioned Do Good. I know that is part of your mission. Tell us about your collaboration with World Central Kitchen.
Yes, I mean, come on. So, you know, we created this company in 2020 in some of the darkest times, and we just wanted a brand that stood for goodness, that was just shined out joy and light. And so it is actually our motto to make the do-gooder. So that's our motto. And then when we set out, it's part of our charter is to have a percentage of everything that we sell that goes to our charitable partner in World Central Kitchen. And they are just such an incredible partner.
We got to take this conversation over on our live platforms. Be right back.
Let's do it.
All right, go ahead and finish that, because I also want to know if like a percent of the proceeds are going towards that work.
Yeah, so a percentage of everything that we sell, that product goes to World Central Kitchen. And in addition, when our customers go and check out online, they actually can check a box and add and round up and donate even more. And then we also have an announcement that's coming up on Giving Tuesday, which is coming up, where we have a really large prize, and all of the net proceeds are going to World Central Kitchen, who is our collaboration partner on all of this.
Got it. Okay, so how do you sell, like, do you sell them by the box, and what is the price point?
Yeah, so it kind of depends how many you're buying. Right now, it's only for sale at goodles.com. So the price point starts at about $350. Online. So that's where you can find them currently. But very soon we will have additional announcements for all the locations that you can find them, where all the places that you would expect and the places that you might buy normal mac and cheese will be the places that you'll find Goodles.
All right, Jen, the biggest surprise for me today is that Gal can look the way she does and eat mac and cheese. Wow. Everything in moderation, I guess, right?
Everything in moderation. But yeah, it's pretty exciting because we've got, you know, the high protein, the high fiber, high nutrition, 21 nutrients, all from organic veggies, and prebiotics, fewer calories, all of that kind of stuff. And I think you won't even know the difference. So.
All right. Well, Jen, thank you so very much. Perhaps this will make it onto some Thanksgiving plates. I appreciate your time, and happy Thanksgiving to you.
Happy Thanksgiving to you too. Thanks.
Bye-bye. All right, how much time do we have coming back? 5? Thank you very much. I have a piece of gray hair here. Thank you so much for joining us on this interactive show, Getting Answers. We'll be here every weekday at 3, on air and on live stream, answering your questions. World News Tonight is next. Bye-bye.